you could see how she worked, because if you were visiting Heathery Braes, she would often have a painting. I don't remember her ever using an easel. She had an easel, but she would pin large sheets of paper to the wall and work on them there. So she was kind of living with a painting as she worked it. And she, rather than, spend a day painting, she would go back and forth to the paintings and develop them. And you can see that in the paintings, I think, because those later works are mostly multimedia. So she was reflecting on them and going back to them with another medium perhaps, or adding another layer of texture.
She could speak to anybody, and did. She had no side whatsoever. She would be chatting away to everybody. And very intelligently too. She was very, very intelligent. I used to read when she saw a lot of George Mackay Brown, and I think through George she got into reading very deep books, philosophy and all that stuff. And, she could take it all in and remember it. She was very clever.
She destroyed a lot of stuff. When she knew she was dying, she bought a shredder. She'd seen what had happened with George Mackay Brown, I think. And she bought a shredder and she shredded an enormous amount of stuff. So we knew that what was left was work she was proud of. Oh, yeah. And a lot of that went into the Peer collection. They have a lot of drawings. Mm-hmm. She, this is a story that she brought back from hospital. She was in ARI and she was going up the corridor and she came across one of her paintings. So she was looking at the painting and there was a note next to the painting which had attributed it to someone else. And Sylvia always carried this little purse bag around her shoulders, and so she took out the pencil and she scored out the name and she wrote in her own name, as she would. And somebody came by, a member of staff came by and said, "You can't do that." And she said, "Yes, I can. It's my painting." I don't know what their response was or where they went from there, but she was kind of smugly happy about this. It appealed to Sylvia. It was very much part of her personality. More than any other artist, I think for me, she's captured not just the landscape, but the essence of living in the Isles. The constantly changing light, the constantly changing water, the wildlife that's moving through that landscape. I can't think of anybody else who does it better.
I can't believe I've done so much work in my life, plus being someone that was in full-time teaching. I taught the second year etching. 2.5 days they came to me, and 2.5 days they went to Derek Ashbate to do screen printing. Then we swapped, and by the end, that was their introduction to both those forms of printmaking. So I felt I'd been opening windows and doors for other people just a bit long enough. So I came out 5 years before my statutory retiral age to concentrate on my printmaking, which I had taught myself printmaking. Out of books and just sort of experimenting myself, I have had people say, "Oh, I saw your work, as in the hospital." But I always remember sitting in Peacock and she said, "There's the woman that helped me through my birthing pangs." And I said, "What do you mean? I wasn't there. But it was, she saw my work and it calmed her down going into the ward to have her child. And then a friend's daughter said the same thing. She said, "Mum, I was being wheeled through and I was so agitated. Then I saw Francis's work and it came." I mean, that's two young women going to the maternity ward to have their children tell me just incidentally told me that. And as I say, there was one at one of the desks where you checked in. It was the Heinisch Rocks one was used to hang above that for a long time. I don't know how it is done now. I haven't been myself there recently. And well, I had Heinisch Rocks is based on an original drawing. Yeah. A drawing that I did, and it was the very early days of me doing screen printing. I did that one with Arthur Watson. Mm-hmm. Arthur was one of my students and a founding member of Peacock, which is, I don't know what it's called now, Peacock Visual Arts, but it was Peacock Printmakers in those days, with very much emphasis on printmaking. And he had shown me how my work could develop into screen print. And he could see how much I had put into the line drawing, which I can't remember, but at that time I was quite often using a swan's feather pen. You know, I use quill pens a lot. I picked them up, and I used them. And so I'm pretty sure that was an ink drawing that we based that on. And he could see, you know, a load of drawing in it. So we use the line a lot. The line is in that, which in some of my later prints that I've done, say in some of the last few years, based on some of my sky imagery, which much later in my life, it is. I don't rely on the graphic line so much. Yes. But it was an extraordinary. It still is this rock set up where there is a viewpoint between the rocks that look out onto the sea, and you're actually looking over towards the Dutchman's Cap, and some of these distant islands are there on the horizon. And I go right down to the pebbles and to the lichen on the rocks, even that within the same image, which is it was certainly what I did then. I mean, everything from the pebbles on the shore, the tiny pebbles that are in front of me, and some of the bits of driftwood, to the lichen on some of the rocks that are not covered by the sea, to the very distant islands on the horizon, all in the one image. Findlater Castle?
Yes.
You should know that one.
I do remember that.
2 plate.
It was 2 plates.
Yes. I'm really fond of that one. You know, it's a very dramatic site, that, well, at least, I don't know, I haven't been up for years, things could be different, but to imagine that people lived there, and that it's an extraordinary, powerful kind of place when I saw it first. I've been there, well, I've certainly been there twice now, but the time that I went, and always the first time visit to places makes the most profound impression on me, you know, and I don't feel my imagery or my way of seeing has been static over the years.
No, not at all. No. It's
gone on changing and maybe developing with what I want to say. Not developing necessarily for the better or worse or whatever, but I just feel I have reacted differently over, decades?
Yes, absolutely.
Decades. Yeah.
What's your work about? What are the images actually of, and what do they mean when they come together for you?
It just the best way to describe them is they're just a collage of different, different things. It could be past, present, future, or it could be politics. It could be religion. It could be music. It could be something I saw at the bus stop. Like I said, it's always having that starting point. Like a main character, and trying to build everything else around it. So it could be from climate change to, deforestation, or, any current affairs, anything going on. It's almost like just waiting for a topic to come up, or by maybe reading or watching the news or reading the magazine or something that's going on somewhere, and just picking it up. And some of them are really obvious, but with this one, it's a different approach to most of my work, and I think that's what I really like about it. I just hope it comes out like I thought it would. So.
You've said you're based in Aberdeen, you've lived in Aberdeen for quite a while now, and that you like going into the countryside and it's a beautiful area. Does you being based here, does that influence your work?
Oh yeah, I've been to most of the islands like Shetland, Orkney, Skye, Louis, Aries, and everywhere you go in Scotland, you get a taste of. It's just different everywhere. From Louis and Aries are on the same island, but the landscape is completely just different. So that's really inspiring. And yeah, just traveling around, my travels around the world as well. You take in the culture, you see how people do things, and in a way, just trying to interpret that in my own way. Sometimes it's clear, sometimes it's not. Sometimes I can explain it, sometimes I can't. Yeah.
So with that, do you title the work to kind of allude to something to explain what it's about, or do you let people decide that for themselves?
I prefer people to decide that for themselves. But, like I said, some are really obvious, and some are just like a little bit of like collage of everything out. And you can look at it and see something else. And I think I really like that as well. I've been to places that my work has been shown before, and hearing people speak about it, not knowing I'm the artist. And some people see sand, some people see water, and I kind of really like that. It's about just finding the boundary and the line, not crossing it, not staying behind it, just staying on the line. It can be open to interpretation, but it's still a bit obvious. You can make your own mind up in a way.
Norman Matheson, who was building up the collection at Aberdeen Royal Infirmary and Grampian Hospitals Art Trust, contacted me and asked whether I'd be interested to submit the designs for a mural. And I said, absolutely. And so I remember thinking that I should create, or I could create something about the oil industry and make it relevant to so many Aberdonians. And rather than a sort of cutesy picture of little fishing boats, I was very much about responding to what was happening in Aberdeen at the time. So I created these, and these are, I have here one of the large oil rig paintings, which now no longer exists in actual fact, but this is a picture. The actual painting is about 3 meters across, just to give you a sense of scale. I was all set to plan, and we'd got the site, and then Piper Alpha happened.
Yes.
That July, and it happened in the middle of me presenting these drawings practically. The timing was just, awful.
Yeah.
And I went back to Edinburgh and I had a good think, and then I phoned them up the next day and I said, I'm not going to do it. I said, I want to do the mural, but I'm not going to do those images. So I pulled that drawing, but in the meantime, I had been doing a project of drawings at Aberdeen Harbour for Grampian television.
Okay.
And that had been a kind of artist, watching an artist for a week, working and then taking them into the studio. And I thought, Aberdeen Harbour is fantastic.
Yep.
My dad grew up just, half a mile from the harbour, and as a boy walked around the harbour in the 20s and early 30s. And he used to tell us stories about it. So I made a set of 3 drawings that were completely new and pulled them together. And I said, I want to do a safe harbour.
Yep.
And this is the reason why. I said, when people escape from the oil rig by helicopter or by ship, or when a fishing boat or a supply boat has been out to sea, when they come back to Aberdeen Harbour, they're safe.
Yep.
And I want that association linked in with the hospital.
Yep.
And so they said, go for it.
And I believe, if I'm right, that is one of our first, possibly one of our only murals. And she says 1988. That was the year we became a charity. So there's a real connection with GHAT and how we began is with that. And it's also, I think, one of the most loved pieces in the collection for the community. As you said, I love that idea that nation state. 'Cause I always think of the hospital as a community in itself. There's 20,000 people come through the door every day. And so it's a community in itself. The other lovely thing about it, you talked about your father and your connection with the hospital, but the Alan Downey unit, which is named after your father, is literally about 10 yards up the corridor from that artwork. So there's a real sort of connection going on there with the artwork, with your family and with Aberdeen.
I know from having visited people and from feedback that people give me that people need distraction and they need comfort.
Yeah.
And if you're sitting in a waiting room or even going down a corridor, and let's face it, a lot of hospital corridors all look the same, you need to spell out difference. And it's personal. Each artwork is made, it's a human gesture made by hand, and it's that hand. And one of the things that I'm more and more aware of and concerned with is that it's made by touch.
Yes.
And so when an artist draws or paints something or sculpts something, of course you've got huge amounts of digital work, but I think hospitals have to really pay attention to the fact that the art is made through touch. It's the haptic relationship. People traditionally are healed through touch. Mm-hmm. The physician's touch and the nurse's touch, the act of caring, has a very strong resonance with these personal paintings.
For many people, it can be overwhelming to enter a gallery and be faced by so many artworks. This might be down to the abundance of choice, where to start first. All this visual richness can be overstimulating, and it can be easy to drift through, quickly glancing at one or two pieces that catch your eye, taking no notice of the rest. For many of us though, being confronted by art can also cause anxieties around whether it's really something for us. If we haven't studied its history, or the various techniques involved to produce an artwork, we might falsely believe we're not qualified to have an opinion, or that we're not entitled to take our time to enjoy the works on display. In this film, I want to share some approaches you can take to reading an artwork, forming your own valid opinion based on the objective details in view and what you make of them. This will utilise and enhance your visual literacy skills, skills you use in everyday life to make sense of the world around you. In order to do this, I've come to Gallery 16 in Aberdeen Art Gallery, which is shoreline themed. In presenting various coastal views, this collection of works allows the viewer to make interesting comparisons between artistic approaches to the same subject. We're going to compare two landscape paintings by Scottish artists who feature heavily in the Grampian Hospital's Art Trust collection, Frances Walker and Sylvia Wishart. A former lecturer of drawing and painting at Gray's School of Art, Frances Walker was a founding member of Peacock's Printmakers in Aberdeen and is one of Scotland's most highly regarded living artists. Sylvia Wishart was also taught at Gray's after studying there. She lived in Aberdeenshire for some time after being born and raised in Orkney. Firstly, let's look at Frances Walker's work. I won't tell you the title of this piece just yet. I want you to take some time to look at the work. Pause this video for around a minute and do nothing but look at the painting and take it in. Now, without looking back at the painting again, grab a pen and a piece of paper and sketch down as much of the image as you can remember. Don't worry about drawing a masterpiece. This is just for you to get an idea of what things stood out to you from the image. Pause the video again at this point and give yourself a couple of minutes to do your sketch. Now you've finished your sketch, let's look back at the work again. Take some time to compare and take notes on what you remembered, which features stood out to you most, what details didn't you remember. Is your sketch proportional? For all of these questions, consider why this is the case. Pause the video again to contemplate these questions, and feel free to rewind to hear them repeated. We'll come back to Walker's painting again later, but for now, let's repeat the same process with Sylvia Wishart's work. As before, take some time to look at the work. Pause this video for around a minute and do nothing but look at the painting and take it in. Now, once again, without looking back at the painting, give yourself a couple of minutes to sketch down as much of the image as you can remember. Now you've finished your sketch, let's look back at the work again. Compare and take notes on what you remembered, which features stood out to you the most, what details didn't you remember. Is your sketch proportional? And again, consider why for each one. Pause the video again to contemplate these questions. Evening departure. This evening at the foot of the D, a pop-up picture book scene. Figures fall fast asleep behind a paper city. Scottish siesta after today's unexpected heat. Tug the tab on the left, the standby boat leaves, sliding out of the harbour mouth. Slow motion as 3 seagulls freeze, frame in a warm sea breeze. Can you hear the life ring's O as it glows in the golden light? Can you read the vernacular of cottages laying low behind the flood barrier's might? The night's drawing in, I must go. Reverse the boat back from the sea into the paper's folds and cuts. Straighten up your jacket sleeve, then carefully close these pages shut.
Now I've got an example here, which is quite a unique item. It's over 700 years old, this charter, but as you can see, it's got its own special enclosure here. It was previously kept in kind of a perspex enclosure, if you like, but which had a bottom to it and a top, and the two parts of it were kind of screwed together. But the charter itself is made from parchment, which is sheep skin, and it's got this kind of yellowish colour. It's quite characteristic of parchment. So it's an organic material, and the perspex enclosure in which it was previously housed, it wasn't really allowing it to expand and contract, and there were certain features of the document that were obscured. For example, in the previous enclosure, this lovely tag for the seal was folded up. So when we had this conserved about a year ago, the conservator took it out of the perspex enclosure and relaxed the document in a humidity chamber. So the parchment was allowed to kind of absorb a little bit of moisture, and that helped it kind of relax. So that took some of the creases out, although the creases themselves are part of the evidence around the document. So they're important to leave traces of them, and you can still see them on the document here. But she was also able to unfurl this lovely tag that the seal was originally attached to. And you can see that this has a slit through it. The ends would have been tucked through this slit to make a kind of knot that the seal would have been attached to. And you can actually see some of the original wax. It's white on here, is still attached, but sadly the seal is no longer. But the lovely thing about this new enclosure is that all aspects of the document can be seen, including the writing on the reverse, and you can see very well on this side how the document would have been folded up at one point into just this kind of 4 by 3 inch rectangle, and it would have been quite a small area that this writing would have been written on, and that would have told people what the charter was. But it's a charter that grants lands to the city of Aberdeen by Robert the Bruce, and it was granted to the city in 1319, so it had its 700th birthday last year.
So you reckon this may have been held by Robert the Bruce himself?
It would have been in his presence, that's for sure.
Amazing that we can stand here and you can show me both the front and the rear without us actually having to touch this object at all. That is beautiful.
It's very robust now.
Yeah.
In this lovely
and so this makes it perfectly possible for you to bring this along, to give it to a researcher, for it to be studied.
That's right.
So we've talked about the materials in your archive and how they are kept for generation after generation. I'd like to have a look at some different types of items that people might have in their own homes, and which we tend to describe as ephemera, the objects that were not made to last so very long, and to see what people can do themselves at home. So I have got here a box with some material that comes from our own family, and they are some family photos. There is an old Christmas card from 1939 when the Christmas theme could still just be nice flowers. There are some banknotes in an envelope, very old banknotes. So the kind of things that people inherit from their parents. I found some of this material as I was clearing out my father's attic. And it came to me in envelopes, in literally a plastic carrier bag. And of course, they are not the best ways of storing items. So here we have a system that's just kind of off the shelf method of storing items. It's again made with that polyester material, nice big sleeves. And this, in fact, is a set of documents that relate to an ancestor who was an opera singer. So we have here a number of kind of calling cards that she would hand out at the end of her performances. And this is not quite an ideal system because, as we can see, the pockets are actually a bit too big for the items that are in them. And an attempt has been made to keep items in place with these little strips, but it hasn't quite worked. But it does allow us to look through these cards without having to touch any of them. And here, if we want to see some of what's on the back, again, we have the individual sleeves. Not all of them have information on the back, but those that have, we can just see that without needing to handle the item itself. But it does give an idea of how you can take a collection of material, even if they are different items, not just photos, but some of them are quite firm card and some are little leaflets, and bring them together in one system that then allows all of it to be kept together.